1 week season.
One week season, bam, La Familia. Welcome back to week 3 of the DFS Labs FanDuel edition. My name is Mike Johnson, mjohnson86. I'm your host here this week. Without further ado, I will bring back my esteemed colleague, Mr. Maximus. Maximus, welcome to the stage. The big ringer. We got Maximus is out on tour. We had a little delay here trying to get things started. He had to have his security team get the groupies out of the hotel room. Things are getting crazy there. I mean, you couldn't have a bigger dichotomy in DFS player between, what he's got going on, living the high life, and I'm, just racing home from dropping my daughter off at preschool, having a latte. Like it just, I mean, we're on opposite ends of the spectrum here. Maximus, tell me about the high life. How is it?
The duality. Yeah, I'm on the road on tour with my band right now. I'm a drummer in a rock group. Not quite as glamorous as Mike just depicted, but we were trying to figure out a little bit of technical difficulties. I'm on my road manager's laptop right now. I'll be back to the usual setting next week. But yeah, it's good that we can do this again and get ready for week 3.
Absolutely. Hey, before we get going, I got something quick for you. I want to show you this.
Oh, nice. Represent.
So, I got this. I happened to see this in my closet just yesterday, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, I gotta bring this out for the show." I got this in 2014, so it's almost a decade ago now. It's wild to think about. But I made the live final, the football live final. That was before Vegas. The powers that be decided to cut their own arm off and ban DFS out in Nevada. They used to host the live finals out there, so we stayed at the Cosmo. It was a pretty sick weekend. But this was part of like the gift bag that I got. It's a flat brim. That's not really my style, but I'm gonna rock it today for the FanDuel Labs. If you're cool with that,
you're representing everything. 1 week season FanDuel.
Yeah, we got the merch here. We're ready to go. We still have, if anyone wants to make bids, other shoulder on the artwork back there, feel free to hit me up on Discord or Twitter. We'll be auctioning those valuable pieces off. But I digress. We are here to build some sharp and profitable DFS lineups for FanDuel. I'm going to share my screen and bring it up, Max. Kind of let you go through like we have been. Talk us through this lineup that you have built. Again, this is for the 30K contest. It is a $65 entry, 5 max, $4,000 up top. Can kind of see the payout structure there. So, Maximus, you want to talk us through this lineup that you've built for week 3? Kind of how it came together and what you're thinking.
Last week, as I was on the road, I did play a lesser tournament 5 entry max where it was $7 a team. And I had a profitable week. I had 3 of my 5 teams placed. My best team placed 24th out of 3,400. I wish that would have been in this tournament because I have a feeling I may have been top 3 with a score of 153 points. That's usually good enough to potentially win this tournament with less entries of only 524. But so this week we have, again, looking at the, there's a couple of injury designations you got to watch, of course, but that Charger Viking game, I mean, Vegas has it at 54 spread right now, 27 implied team total on both teams. Both teams are 0-2. Both teams have to have a win. It looks like it sets up on the face of it to be a good game environment to dive into. So I have Kirk Cousins, not a rushing quarterback, but I do have him double stacked with Justin Jefferson and TJ Hawkinson. Pricing is tighter, definitely tightened up with FanDuel this week from what I was looking at, but I was still able to fit that in, and I think I have a balanced team overall, at least on first view of devising stuff. So I have Isaiah Pacheco. I read your Pacheco take in the Discord. think it may have been a week early. If he plays, of course, I think this could be a good week for him. Chicago isn't really too concerning for Kansas City. They may want to
For a
get the
dumpster fire. You can say it.
Exactly.
We don't have to be politically correct here. There's a lot going on in Chicago right now.
I think they may try to develop or try to give the ball to Pacheco more, maybe give Mahomes a rest for the day.
Well, I don't know I don't know how much of that game you watched or how much you saw, but so he had 1 carry in the first half. He ended up with 12 carries for 70 yards, and I think he had like a 5-yard catch. And at halftime, He had 1 run for 4 yards. So, their offense is struggling. They probably should have been running him more, and he was very good on the opportunities he got. Also, kind of part of that when I was high on him, was expecting Edwards-Helaire to be out because they had activated LaMichael Pirine, but then Edwards-Helaire still did play, so he took a little bit of work, but it was more about the play calling. I think, and I think that's a sharp take. He's in a good spot this week.
Yeah, he was sharp last week too, I thought. But I think sometimes when we predict these kind of things, we're like a week early, and then the next week it actually comes to pass. But so Pacheco, I have Raheem Mostert in a skinny stack with Javonte Williams in the flex spot. I have Mike Williams as the bring back to the Cousins, Jefferson, TJ Hawkinson stack. Amari Cooper, who is dealing with a couple of injuries, but at his price, switch out to Elijah Moore, the other Browns receiver, or Marquise Brown, who's obviously going to be playing from behind probably. And then I have the Texans defense, which historically has actually given Trevor Lawrence a lot of problems when I looked that up over the last couple of years. He's had some of his worst outings against the Texans. Division rivalry. Going a little cheaper on this build. Reminding everybody it's 5 teams. So there'll definitely be a team where I always like to lock button Dallas in, who's the highest priced defense this week. And then what I like about this lineup, you can kind of, based on the injuries at these price points, you can switch stuff around and still, kind of field a good team based on what I have so far. And so, that's a quick rundown of the team, at least at the moment.
I'm going to make a quick switch for you. We're going to put Javonte up here, and we're going to have Pacheco in the flex.
Yep. Yeah,
he's your only late guy. So, that gives you some optionality. So then if we scroll down, because this lineup does use all the salary, but then let's look at, what kind of late swap options you would have around Pacheco. Because that's the thing too, is I think he'll probably play. He played the whole game. My guess is more of like a rest day type thing. But we might not know. It might kind of be up in the air. So, it's nice to have other options. And the other thing is, like, if there's questions around him, that'll keep his ownership even lower possibly. So, and he doesn't get named active or inactive till about 3:00 Eastern time. So you got Adam Thielen. Let's see. Mooney, probably don't want to go there. Khalil Herbert on the other side of that game. Sky Moore. So, yeah, you've got all the Kansas City receivers you could switch to. DJ Chark, kind of a deep threat. You've got some options there. It's not like the prettiest thing, but, that little bit of uncomfortable feeling around that is kind of what helps make it a good play, I think.
It's an interesting week in that it seemed like more of the marquee matchups were in the 1:00 window and not the 4:00 as much. But definitely hadn't really had time to play around with the late swap because, to your point, you always want 2 or 3 if it's feasible to play around with, especially when there's injury designations. Although in saying that, sometimes, it's just the team just feels the best with 1:00 window. I mean, it does happen from time to time, but
I think that should be, just building the team should be your first focus. And then if you happen to have late swap options, once you have the team built, make sure that you have the players like using the flex and that sort of stuff, like we talked about. I think that's the important part there. I also think that, looking at this roster, obviously I like how you built around that Minnesota passing game. It's going to be popular. Like that is what it is. But I also think that sometimes I think we can get a little bit too cute. Like people just look for reasons to talk themselves out of the obvious place sometimes. And especially in a contest like this, you don't always have to do that. You just have to find other ways to kind of be unique. And then when you look at, I like the idea that I believe the Denver-Miami game is the second highest total on the slate. If I have that correct, just pulling it up here. Yeah, 48.5. I think that's the second highest on the slate. So that's an interesting way to build around that game. I think Javonte, he's got potential to kind of really kickstart pretty soon, and he's priced at that $6,100 price point. I think he had all but one running back carry last week for the Broncos. So he's a guy who he's like a $7,500 back. By the middle of the season, I would think, as long as he doesn't get injured or something. So you're kind of getting a discount there. You've got Mostert, which the Broncos defense has not looked great these first 2 weeks. And then you potentially are without Jalen Waddle, which, could make that somewhat concentrated offense even more concentrated. So, and then, very few people are going to play them together, right? Like, each of them aren't going to have a ton of ownership just on their own. But especially on like this little bit smaller slate or smaller contest, you might be the only one in that contest that has that pairing together. So that's kind of interesting when you consider, each of those guys is going to get a pretty big share of their offense's touches. They have pretty high touchdown equity in theory with their offense. And then you get that unique pairing where if it does hit, you're kind of rolling nicely there. The other thing I wanted to touch on is you've obviously built around this Minnesota Los Angeles game is Alexander Madison. I think is really interesting this week. On FanDuel, he is, I believe, 6,200, 6,300. So $6,300. Obviously, he's had not a very good start, 11.9 points and then 3.4 points. But I think it's interesting because, the Vikings passing game just had such and I'm not trying to tell you to change this particular lineup. I think it's built well. But the Vikings passing game is getting all the love. They had a really good game against Philly. I do think, they're a great play, obviously. But also, and then the Vikings just traded for Cam Akers. So, everybody thinks like Madison's dead or there's going to be this huge timeshare. But what's interesting to me is the Akers situation. Clearly, he's not like a coach's favorite type, right? Like he's not like to be in the doghouse like he is. The type of stuff that gets a player in that spot is he doesn't know the playbook very well. He's not trusted in pass protection. He's not the guy that shows up early. He's not the guy who's like, so it's hard for me to believe that he got traded yesterday on Wednesday. So that means best case, he's at practice today, Thursday. This is obviously we're airing Friday, but we're recording Thursday. So, you're looking at 1 or 2 days of prep. So like to me, Madison still is going to be kind of that main guy. And his price point is down. I would expect his ownership is going to be pretty low because just the overall sentiment. And he might be like the perfect leverage play off how everybody's viewing this game. And that can be really valuable in in any contest, but in these little bit smaller contests like the one you're in, like if you're building 5 lineups and you're going to have 1 or 2, let's say, around this passing game, I would for sure try to have 1 or 2 that also has Madison in it, because most of the field is going to build kind of around that game, right? Like the Vegas totals, like it would be pretty surprising if that Minnesota Los Angeles game is not relatively high scoring. So, that's just the ultimate kind of leverage play there. Oh, you're muted. You're muted. You're muted. You got to unmute. More technical there we are.
Hear me? Yeah, I said, and Jam talks about levers, and kind of if you're doing a 5-team or 3 or 5-team, kind of like a whole kind of cluster. So on one lineup, if I'm going to use another quarterback, then Madison could fit in nicely to get exposure to that game still, where the touchdowns may be coming through the run game, and then that helps whoever your quarterback is on another team that you're going to build. And so, yeah, I agree. Madison definitely was in mind for one of the other 5-entry max teams to get full exposure to that game.
Yeah, and that's, and there's 2 ways to play it. And that's kind of the cool thing. Like, you've kind of talked about kind of building your lineups and structuring them off of each other in these contests, is that you can do that in 1 or 2 lineups, and you can still build around what, is kind of going to be the chalk build, right? Like, I think Minnesota, that Minnesota Chargers game is going to be fairly, people are going to want to build around that. But like this lineup you have, that's fine. You just got to find unique ways to play with the rest of it, because there's a reason it's going to be chalky. There's a reason it's going to be popular. It's the highest total game on the slate, and both defenses have looked like they're not going to stop really anybody. The Titans looked like, they looked like an FCS level college team offensively in week 1 against the Saints. And then they dropped 27 points on the Chargers. So it's a situation where, sometimes you can outsmart yourself trying so hard to get away from these spots. And that's kind of the interesting thing about, building these multiple lineups, especially in contests this size where you're not trying to beat, 200,000 people or whatever it is.
Right. And then real quick on the Amari Cooper, unfortunately, Nick Chubb, of course, has been lost for the season. So Amari Cooper, if he's healthy, could be a focal point of that offense. And he fits price-wise as kind of like my onesie to kind of finish out that team, just for reference. That was my, explaining that one.
Yeah. And I mean, going a step further there, you think about, I talked about the Madison example, but you also have, Jerome Ford, I would think at $5,600 this week, after having the really nice game on Monday Night Football, where he scored 22.6 FanDuel points against the Steelers. I would think he's going to be fairly popular. So, looking at your roster here, so you've got Ford, $5,600 feature back. I know they signed Kareem Hunt, but Hunt kind of similar to the Cam Akers thing. I don't think he's necessarily going to come in and just swoop everything away. Kevin Stefanski said Jerome Ford is their feature back now. And I guess if the Browns had plenty of time to make the decision to choose Jerome Ford or Kareem Hunt, and they've chosen Jerome Ford for 6 months or whatever. So, I think he's going to be the feature back, and that's kind of what everybody I would think would expect. But this is an interesting roster because you've got Amari Cooper, and then you've got Pacheco, who we already talked about, but he's at basically the same price as Ford. Ford's $5,600, Pacheco's $5,700. So you've got kind of like a double leverage thing. If Cooper has a big game, he's taking points away from Ford. That's making it more likely that Ford is going to stumble and fail. And at his volume and his price, he's going to be pretty popular. So you're hurting those other rosters. And then you've got Pacheco priced the same. So rosters who are built similarly with a running back in that price range, you've got a running back who kind of a similar spot, but his team's expected to score more points and he's got a better matchup. So, it's just a really I think it's little things like that when people are building lineups, they don't really take, into account little things. And I don't know if you were even necessarily specifically trying, with those two things, but there are, it's little lineup building things like that I'm always trying to find and do. And sometimes they don't work, sometimes they do, but you're putting yourself in position where, like, Amari Cooper scores 2 touchdowns against the pass funnel and kicks out Jerome Ford, and then Isaiah Pacheco springs you ahead of all the other rosters that have a running back from that range. It's just a neat way to, how the slate kind of comes together and the players' salaries work. That's kind of as JM talks about, the puzzle of DFS each week.
Absolutely. Differentiate. I mean, if you are going to play a popular game environment, you have to learn to differentiate elsewhere and be unique. And it's easier said than done with the pricing sometimes, but
Yeah, FanDuel, I wanted to talk about that this week too, because like FanDuel, I texted JM and Xandamir. By the way, shout out to Xandamir and JM. Big weeks.
That's right.
This last week. JM took second in the slant on DraftKings. I think he had a couple of other high placing line. I think he had like 4 in the top 50 or something. And then Xandamir took down the big contest on Yahoo. Several subs did well also. So it was a big week for the 1 week season fam. So shout out to them. But I was texting in our group chat with Hilo, Xandamir, JM. When I looked at the pricing for this week, I said, FanDuel decided to fight back with their pricing finally. I went to look at things, and you've got Eckler. He's not going to play, but, they had him almost at 10K. Jefferson, Tyreek, Pollard, Bijan, all at 9K or higher. You got Keenan Allen at 8,800, who, he had a big week last week, but JM's always talked about how his ceiling weeks are usually few and far between. So, they're making it a little bit more difficult, at least. I think people have talked a lot over the years about FanDuel's pricing being a little bit softer, but those higher prices, definitely, it makes you think twice, because you have that type of price where you need, when you get over 9K, you're basically looking at, you need about a 25-point game to kind of justify that, or, close to that at least. And, that basically means you got to score 2 touchdowns. So it makes the decision points a lot harder. And you can't just build these superstar teams quite as easily. So I kind of like that.
And a quick note on Mike Williams, Keenan Allen had the big game, but Mike Williams actually out-targeted Keenan Allen last week. They were oddly using him in the short areas of the field. He's usually more of the deep threat, but it's good to see he's still being used. Yeah.
They've actually kind of swapped that with Kellen Moore this year. Williams is being used a lot more in the slot, and Keenan Allen, who used to be like primarily a slot receiver, he's running something like 50 or 60% of his snaps out wide. I don't remember the exact number, but he's out wide a lot, being used down the field a little more. And then Williams, they're kind of transitioning him to the, he still runs some deep routes, but been transitioned to kind of like a big slot, like almost like a souped up tight end sort of deal where he's working more of the mid areas of the field. So it's just interesting there because he's become a little bit more consistent. He'll probably become a lot more consistent than he has been in past years. So it'll be interesting how that works. I thought that was really interesting when I first saw that in the preseason that they were using Keenan Allen more out wide, considering he's like 30 years old now or whatever. So it's just usually at that age, guys are transitioning the other way, not being moved from the slot to the perimeter.
Yep.
Let's see. All right. Is there anything else you want to talk about here I know you got to get on the road here. The fans do not want to be left hanging out on tour. So, I'm sure you've got Taylor Swift, I think you said was opening for you tonight. So I'm sure you want to give her instructions on making sure she's not in your dressing room, that sort of thing.
Not quite anything like that, but definitely about to head to New York City. And yeah, I got to get rolling. But yeah, always a pleasure to do this. Good luck to everyone, obviously, this week, and look forward to doing it again next week and continuing on. Absolutely.
We'll look forward to stories from the road next week. And hopefully we'll be breaking down that winning lineup. Are you going to get in the big tournament this week?
I'm going to make sure that, like I said, I don't know what the results were because you have to know somebody that was in the tournament to get those results. And I thought maybe Xandermere was going to be in it again, but he told me that he didn't play that one. Good for him, as he won the Yahoo one. But I'm curious that team of 153 would have been in that bigger tournament. So I'm going to get back to the
it would have been top 5 for sure. It would have been top 5 for sure.
I know.
So
I know.
Sorry to be the
living with regrets.
Yeah. Well, we live and we learn. It happens, but that's why we just keep building sharp lineups, and we just the chips will fall where they may. So
absolutely.
All right. Well, that's going to do it for us for today. Thank you, 1 Week Season fam. We will see you in the Discord. We will see you on Twitter. Check out the season. The games are live in the NFL Edge, and we will be all over the scroll with the sharpest plays and game theory for the week. I am Mike. He is Max. We'll see you next week.
1 Week Season.